Alright, so the type of sand casting that I'm going to do is called cope and drag casting. Now, what it basically is cope and drag is like the bottom and the top of the mold. I don't know which is which, don't ask me. I just know that that's what they call it. And what I have here is a frame, which I built out of wood. It's tightly pressed together, held together pretty well. And the idea is I'm going to fill one half with sand and then the other half with sand, with the mold somewhere in the middle. I just have some clamps putting these together because I don't want it to slide around while I'm moving it, because it can shift and you don't want that to happen. So each side is supposed to be identical, about the same size. When you're doing these, you should always consider making a rectangle, and I will explain why a little bit later, but just remember always to make a rectangle. And always make sure the top and bottom are the same size. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to take one of these sides, I'm going to set that aside for now. Take one of these sides, and I'll lay it flat on a flat surface. I'm going to take my object that I want to cast, so in this case I'm just going to throw that as an example inside. It sits flat. I'm going to put sand on top. I'm going to compress it down as much as possible. I'm going to flip it over, and it'll be floating here on the sand like this. Once this is floating there, so just picture that still sitting there in the sand, I put the second piece on top, put a little bit of powder down here to make sure that the sand doesn't stick to each other, fill this with powder, or with sand, pack it all down, lift it off, and what I'll see is I'll have a flat surface here, and then I'll have my mold there, which I can just pop out. So I can pop that out, and then we'll be left as a hole, and that hole is where the aluminum's going to go. I'll cover it back up. There's going to be a couple pore holes here. It's going to go in, fill it up. When it's done, I just break all the sand apart, pull it out, and I get something like this, or like this. Alright, so you might think, okay, well, how's that going to work? How is sand going to hold together? It's a special type of sand. They call it green sand, and they don't mean it like eco-friendly sand or anything like that. I guess the term green is intended to be kind of like green wood. So, you know, you have like a pine tree you just cut down, they call that green wood because it's wet. Green sand is wet sand. Another type of sand you can use is called petrobond sand. And petrobond sand is very similar, except instead of water, it's got oil in it. I'm going to make some of that later, but for right now I have regular, normal casting sand, green sand, so that's what I'm going to use. So, this is the mold I'm going to be making a cast of, so I'll just be laying it flat in there, and then I'm going to put the sand on top from there. But I just need to get all that stuff ready. Alright, so here is the, I don't know, fun part, hard part, who knows. So, first thing you want to do, put your mold down like that, and cover the whole thing with baby powder. Talcum powder works, cornstarch works just fine, I think. Baby powder that's still made of talcum powder is a little bit harder to find. What's this one made of? Pure talcum, great. Apparently it causes cancer, so again, talcum powder, a little bit harder to find. It works, honestly, about the same as cornstarch. I have heard that the talcum powder doesn't burn as much, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. You're going to be burning a lot anyway. So you cover the whole thing, and that just makes it a slightly smoother surface so that the sand doesn't stick to it as much. And then you're going to sort of brush on all the edges here as well. Get as much of this on there as you can. And that just helps so that the sand, come on, doesn't actually stick to it. Move around on me. If you get some inside there and you don't get it all out of the cracks, that's fine. The aluminum will push it out of the way. The aluminum will also just burn it, so don't worry about that. Once that's there, take your mold and remember which side is the center. So this is the center, another mold's going to go on top. You want to flip it around, set it down like that, and then get a little sieve or a strainer or whatever you want to call this. Oops, apparently it was full of crappy dirt, so there we go. And then you want to put your first bit of sand in. The sand I'm putting on first is what I call facing sand, what they call facing sand. This is actually made of 70 grit silica sand mixed with a little bit of clay dust and a little bit of water, which is probably too much water. What that's going to give me is an extremely even but an extremely fine sand to cover the top, to capture all those details. And you want to kind of do this to get it evenly spread out. You want to sift it on there. Now I only have a little bit of this stuff. I have this tiny container, just because I haven't made too much of it. The way I sort of justify it is I put a little bit on as the facing sand, then I have a gigantic bin of much heavier duty, sort of crappier sand, which I use for the internal fill of the mold. But that way I only go through a little bit of the really expensive sifting sand, or facing sand, versus the far, far cheaper filler sand. Now the filler sand is made the same way. It's a little bit of water, a little bit of bentonite clay. I actually use ground up cat litter. It has to be a very specific type of cat litter, and if you want to know what is a good brand, I'll let you know. But you can't just use any clumping cat litter. Some of it's made from some guy's name clay, Jacob's clay or something like that, or Dawson's Earth or something stupid like that. That stuff doesn't work. What you need is 100% pure bentonite clay. Not many cat litters still, or cat litter companies still use clay because there is a lot of respiratory issues with cats, or I don't know if it's true or not. Oops. But a lot of companies are shying away, and they're using stuff like wheat and newspaper and all kinds of crazy stuff, and that stuff's fine. If you want your cat to poop on that, that's good. Dust-free, that's fantastic. But what we need, well, we need that bentonite clay. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this whole thing up with sand, and then I'm going to bash it down. I'm going to speed it up a bit because this part gets really boring. Okay, so I've made a nice flat surface there. Now, this mold is actually firm enough that I can lift this whole thing up and it won't fall apart. However, because we put so much baby powder on top of that mold underneath, if I were to lift this up, the plastic mold might actually fall out, which is good that it's so loose, but also bad because I also have to make another side and I need to press it flat onto something, and this would just break. So, I'm going to clean this up and then I'll move on from there. Alright, so I've cleaned it up a little bit, set the stuff back there because I need to sweep it this way. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over. Now I want it to go onto another flat surface, and this is really just so that it holds in place really well. Again, this should be solid enough that it won't slide out, it won't move. I just don't want to take any chances. So I'm going to use this, put it like this, see how I have a flat piece here, and a flat piece here. Flip this over. Sand is going to go everywhere because I didn't sweep it up very well. But that's okay, I have a shop vac. Alright, so now I lift that off. Now what we have here is our plastic mold still in place. You can see all the powder on that side, that's fine, that's from the table. I'm just going to clean off the edges just a bit. Actually I have a little brush for that. That's just so we don't get any stray sand going where we don't want it to go. It also helps make a tighter seal. Again, we're going to have to be pressing these two pieces of wood together, and the tighter the better. Aluminum is fairly liquidy. It will try to escape here and there, and we can just cut off the parts that escape out. The main thing is we don't want a full channel going to the outside, otherwise it'll spill out and burn. There actually are quite a few burns on some of these, including this one here. See the burn mark there? That actually came from me pouring into it, but I had another mold where I had a little bit of a dent here, and when I poured the aluminum in, it leaked out the side and lit the whole thing on fire. Fun! Also, hilarious, interesting note, liquid aluminum will immediately ignite wood. Yeah, not that you needed me to tell you that. Okay, so with this like this, the next part I'm going to do is take the mold that I just set over there for some reason, and I'm going to set it on top like this. Oops, I got the wrong way around. I have a little marked here which side is which, so there we go, marked A and B. I think I just marked with A actually, don't mark the other side. So, now that these are together like this, I'm going to put these clamps on, and that's going to hold it in place. So now this is on there pretty secure, pretty nice and secure. What I'm going to do now, put a little bit of powder down there, throw sand, pack all that down, and I'm going to make some little channels for the liquid metal to go into, and then I'm going to take it apart, take the mold out, do all that. That part is more banging dirt down, so I will just skip it. Alright, so now I've filled it up a little bit. You might be asking yourself, well, why isn't it full all the way? Well, that's not important. We'll get to that in a minute. First thing I'm going to do is make some pouring channels. The easiest way I found to do that is you get a little piece of pipe. I use this copper pipe, and you just plunge it down to about as deep as the next level should be. You can usually feel it because the next level is pretty compact under there. And if you actually put your finger over the top of the pipe, sometimes you get lucky. You will pull all that sand out with it. Did I get lucky? Oh, I did too. Alright, and you just kind of, blow it out in your thing. I'm sure that sounded lovely. Now I'm going to make a second hole. I'll put it over here. It should be fine. So just kind of wiggle it down. Oh, and that time, I don't know how far down it went, so there's probably going to be a bit of a divot in the other side, and that's okay. I can always fill that out with sand. Put my finger over the hole, pull it up. Yeah, alright, got it all out. That's it. I'm 3. Okay, so now what I've done here is I've made 2 little holes, right? So the next step is I need to sort of make these holes, useful for what I need them for. I'm just going to stick with the pipe. Let's stick the pipe back in for just a moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build up a small dam. Sorry, I walked away from the camera. I'm going to build up a small dam around the edge of this. And you don't want it to be too close to the outer wall because liquid metal, again, ignites wood instantly. I think we mentioned that maybe. So if any of this liquid metal were to spill and hit this wood, it's going to light on fire. Thankfully, it doesn't burn very long. I don't know why. It just kind of immediately goes out. So what I'm doing first is I'm making a little channel up here. And this is going to be a return channel. So liquid aluminum, if I put too much in, is going to flow out and it's going to pool in a little basin right here. Put my hand over the way so you can actually see it. Alright? Seems good. I'm not going to pour too much extra, so I don't need to make it too big. If you want, you can make it much larger. The other side is sort of the more important side. It really matters what shape you do for this, because that's going to be the side we're pouring in. So I'm just going to pull this back out. And if you want, you can use a little stick or whatever and, make this a little cleaner, a little nicer. Doesn't really matter. Pack it down, just so it doesn't dust all over the place. No matter what, you're going to get sand in this aluminum. It's going to happen. Your collected aluminum up here. And it's going to, aluminum's going to have sand in it now, so the next time you melt it down, you don't want to use this as pure stuff. You probably want to hold on to it and melt it down for slag later, or melt it down and recover it later. But the important part is the in part, the part where the metal is going in. Hopefully you can see it from this camera angle. I can't tell because the GoPro's screen turned off. There, how about I move this forward a bit? That might help. Alright, so what I'm going to build up here is almost like a little dome, right? Bear with me. This dome, I'm going to then indent it on the inside. There are probably really easy ways to do this, but I don't know, this works for me. You can see, I basically made myself a tiny little funnel out of sand. There are other ways to do this. You can take a tin can and you can fill it up with sand, set it on top, and have one of these, and you can just keep reusing those if you want. Those are neat, but I don't really see, they don't really save you all that much time. This way, I don't know, look pretty nice to me. So carefully if I can. Oh, I'll bust it up a bit, that's okay. It's clear. Fix this with your finger, whatever. If sand falls in there, that's fine. We're going to be removing this and getting in there anyway, so we can get a chance to clean it all up. But there. So what I've done is I now have a pour area, so the liquid aluminum is going to pour into here and have a little bit of a spout. I'm going to try to get as much of it actually in there as possible and try not to use this. And then it'll fill up. Eventually, it's going to go to the end and it'll start coming out this other side. As long as I keep pouring metal in, it'll start flowing out the other side until they sort of balance out. and you actually really want this second hole. If you just fill it in, there's no place for the air, the gas, and all that to escape, so it pools and it might not fill all the way to the edges. With 2 holes, it forces the aluminum up one side, and then, like I said, it kind of does that balance thing. And the weight of the aluminum up in here actually pushes the rest of the molten aluminum down back into the mold, and prevents stuff like some of these little things that I've made here. You can see there's a whole bunch of little bumps because I just poured the metal directly in, and it leaves a whole bunch of little surface roughness. Now, if you do one with a closed thing, it's more like that. It's very smooth. There's very, very few holes in it. And that's what we're going for. Also, it doesn't leave this bulbous top because it's going to hit the top sand and it's going to just, go with the other side. So you end up with something more like, well, this, where it's a nice smooth back to it. Alright, so I'm going to, just for the time being, set this mold on, we'll set it on here. There we go. So I lift it up, and you see the sand isn't falling out, and that's good. That means I made the mold properly. I'm going to set it very carefully down on top of this plastic thing. I don't want to set it flat, because the bottom of this mold might not actually be flat. This also is kind of time sensitive, so I'm going to try and go as quickly as I can. What I want to do is get this mold out. That's not always an easy thing to do. Sometimes you can screw little screws in and pull it out, so I'm going to try to do that. Alright, that actually took a lot less time than I thought it was going to take. So I screwed 2 little screws in, and ideally when I pull this out, these sides shouldn't fall in. Now there is one thing that I didn't check, and I really should have before I made this, but I was all excited to make it, was whether the sides were rounded, capped, or pointing the wrong way. Now with molds, like this one's a good example. You see how it's angled up like that? Which means the sand doesn't grip onto it very much, it sort of slides out, and that's what you want. Now if you had your mold the other way around, sand gets trapped into here, and when you pull it out, you pull that sand up and it breaks off and you break your sidewalls. When you 3D print things, it usually makes a bit of a beveled edge, but it really depends on the mold you make. So we'll see how this turns out. So let's have a look here. I'm going to grab them, try to pull them both up at the same time. Okay, so we lost a bit of that edge over there. Sucks, but that's okay. We're going to try to fix it just by using a small piece of dowel or something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of push the broken sand up and out of the way. And what's going to happen is that edge is now going to not be smooth. But that's okay because I can just grind it out and make it nice and flat later. So that's honestly not bad. As far as the quality of the mold itself in there, I'm very, very impressed. Now we have a little flake up here. Might be a bit of a problem, so we might have a little bit of an issue there, but that's okay. I'm going to knock this dust off here. And some people will try to compact it back in. I don't want to do that. And the reason I don't want to do that is because it's just going to fall in and it's going to make weird bumps and lumps and things like that. I would prefer to have the edge broken and for me to grind this out later. So that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to just press this down. And the sides broke like that, again, because the edges were not beveled like this. They were probably a lot more flat. So second time I do it, I'm going to actually edge them in a little bit. If there's any plastic to do that on. There might not be just because this is so hollow on the inside. But that's okay. First try, and that's fine. Alright, I'm just going to touch it up just a little bit, and then I'm going to show you the rest. Alright, so what I actually ended up doing was lifted the whole thing up, flipped it upside down, and all the loose sand fell out. And it stayed in one piece. And that's good. This is a really, really good, this is a very well done mold. Very good job. Thank you, Timber, for that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw little channels from the mold into the spots where the aluminum is going to go down. First thing I'm going to want to probably do is fill in these holes just a little bit. So I'm going to put a little bit of sand down there, fill them in. I know where the holes are. That's all that's really important right now. But I don't want them to be that deep because then the aluminum will go down there first and it just wastes a little bit of aluminum. Now, admittedly, I will just melt that aluminum down, so it hardly matters. But I'm trying to be efficient here. Alright, so I know we're breaking the sidewall. That's okay. I'm going to scrape a little channel. Make sure the channel leads to where that hole is. Just right there. You can pat the sand down a bit if you want. There we go, make it all nice and flat, nice and neat. And what that's going to do is that's going to be the flow channel for liquid aluminum. Liquid aluminum is now going to pour out, follow this channel, fill up the mold, and then it's going to come out this side here, follow this channel, and go out of the mold. That's what I want. Now looking at this, you can see that you can kind of actually see that I'm digging into the shitty sand underneath the good sand, and that's fine. Now you might wonder, well, okay, how do you separate the sand? Well, you don't. Once you've mixed facing sand in with regular sand, it is all now regular sand. It's not going to hurt the regular sand. You have a lower quality product mixing into a higher quality product, you're going to have a problem. You have a higher quality product mixing into a lower quality product, I mean, the product was already pretty low, so who cares what it looks like now? There you go. Nice. This looks good. I'm going to give it one more quick little flip here. Lift it up. And just be very careful. Tilt it over. See? Notice how it's not falling out? That's good. That's a very well made mold. Okay. Now what some people do at this point is they will actually take like a blowtorch and they will actually torch the whole thing down to dry it off a little more. If the sand was super wet, I would highly recommend that. Mine was a little bit dry. I actually just had to rejuvenate it by spraying some water in it, so I'm not too concerned with that. It's going to leave a little bit of a bumpy surface, and that's okay, but honestly, when I use the propane on this sand, it tends to just blow the sand further away, making it a little bit worse. One thing I am going to check on, and hopefully you can see from this camera angle, is the bottom of the other mold. Just get tilted on its side there. Okay, so it probably is a little difficult to see, and I can't really move this camera to show you, because I can't see where it's pointing. But basically, the mold isn't perfectly flat, so I'm just going to scrape along the back with a knife. Make sure it gets perfectly flat. There we go. Just make it nice and flat. Make sure there's no bumps or anything like that, because those will all result in a divot on the back of this, and you don't want that. Okay, now that that's good, I'm going to take the mold carefully. We don't want to move it too quickly. I'm going to put it back on top as absolutely flat as I possibly can. You really only get one shot at this, so be careful when you're setting it down. Okay, there's that side. Once you've set it down, that's where it's going to sit. Okay, pinch my finger. Perfect. So this is all ready to go now. This mold, for all intents and purposes, is ready to be cast. Now, will I be casting it right now? No! Why? Because I wasted a ton of time doing other stuff. Alright. There's baby powder everywhere now. It's like Fern Leaf in here. Anyway, so, the cast is now done. I'm going to set it aside. Normally I would immediately take this outside, start melting metal, and start casting it right away. But it is late. Unfortunately, it's now getting dark around 5 p.m., 6 p.m. It's getting into winter. I don't like smelting at night. It's a little bit dangerous. I can't really see what I'm doing. It also gets really cold, and the propane cylinders that I use, like if they drop down below, if the temperature outside is around 6-7 degrees, after about 20 minutes they freeze solid, and I gotta swap them out. And that's no fun. So, we're gonna do it tomorrow, and through the magic of YouTube, it's gonna seem like either the next video or immediately, depending on what I do. If it is the next video, then thanks for tuning in. Hope you watch the next one. If not, then let's head over there.